you're watching to the point. To the government's dismay, amongst the strongest critics of its land acquisition amendments are its own allies. And at the forefront is the Swadeshi Jagran Manch. With me today is its national co-convener, Dr. Ashwani Mahajan, to explain the Manch's position. He is himself also an eminent economist. Dr. Mahajan, let's start with your reservations over the government's land acquisition amendments. Are you completely opposed to the consent clause as well as the social impact clause?
You see, when this ordinance came, even before that, we made it very clear to the government that this is not going to be very good legislation. About the three things which were earlier there, the conditions for land acquisition for public purpose, acquisition of land, the social impact assessment, the consent clause, and the food security issues. As far as social impact assessment is concerned, this is a internationally established practice.
So you're saying to me that because it's an internationally established practice, it must be retained, it must not be reduced, it must not be done away with.
Thing is that if internationally it is accepted, globally it is accepted, it was there in our law also, 2013 law. There is something which we must think of.
I'm asking you for clarity because the audiences want to hear you give clear answers. Are you therefore saying for these reasons it must not be done away with?
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying.
And then on the consent clause, again I'm asking for clarity. Are you saying it must not be done away with?
See, what I'm saying is no piece of legislation is final. Every time you can change the legislation. 1894 legislation was changed, replaced by 2013. If you find that there is something unpractical, impractical, or you say there can be problems, you can do something about it. But completely doing away with the consent clause and the social impact assessment, I think, and Swadeshi Jagran Manch thing, it's not in the step in the right direction.
Well, you said something very important. Completely doing away with both is not a step in the right direction, but that suggests there is room for some amendment. Let's go through these two clauses one by one. Let's begin with the consent clause.
Okay.
Instead of the present consent clause, which requires 70% and 80% consent, would you accept a reverse consent clause so that if 30% of people whose land is being acquired object, that acquisition doesn't happen?
What we have been suggesting, and even Bharatiya Kisan Sangh has been suggesting, that at least majority consent should be taken.
So you won't accept a reverse consent clause, but
Definitely.
You are prepared to accept a consent clause where the percentage is reduced to 51%.
It's not something which we accept or not accept. This looks better as compared to what you are suggesting, the reverse.
So the 51% clause is better than the reverse consent clause?
Definitely yes.
But what would be your bottom line as a Manch? Is your bottom line 51% consent clause, or are you insisting on 70 and 80%?
No, what I'm saying is that if the government feels that getting 70%, 80% consent is difficult, and for that reason projects may be held up, so as a solution to that, if in certain cases, in exceptional cases, or generally, if 51% clause is imposed, then I think that would look better than what you are suggesting, the reverse.
So if I understand you correctly, and I'm trying to be clear for the audience, you would prefer the present 70% and 80%, but if that cannot be maintained, then you are prepared to come down to 51%.
What I'm saying is that, yes, if I've just suggested that no piece of legislation is final in nature. You can always change. The government, if finds difficult, then they can change. And if it is 51%, I think it look fairly good. Yeah.
All right. That is a pretty clear answer. 51% would look good. I assume, therefore, it means the Swadeshi Jagran Manch will accept it if it has to. Let's come to the social impact clause. Industrialists say, and the government often says the same thing, that the social impact clause at the moment would lead to delays of up to a year, maybe even longer. would you accept a legally time-bound limit that the social impact investigation has to be finished within 6 months?
You see, for this, the government has to walk a step ahead, because social impact assessment requires time because of the inefficiencies on the part of the agencies doing social impact assessment. If you make your machinery more efficient, then I don't think it's going to take much time.
The problem is that inefficiency perhaps is built into the Indian DNA. It's not just in terms of social impact investigation that things are slow and inefficient. In India, everything is slow and inefficient, as a result of which industrialists say, you can't make one machinery faster because the nature of the country is such. A better way is to impose a 6-month time frame, a legally imposed 6-month time frame. Would you accept that?
You see, we don't have any problem with any time frame like thing, but what I feel is social impact assessment, which means assessment about the impact, is likely impact on the livelihood, likely impact on the society, likely impact on the environment. All these things have to be taken care of, because if you don't look at it, if you say I'm going to take away the land without making any social impact assessment, what does it mean? Does it look good?
No, I understand your point.
Yeah.
Land must be acquired after assessing the social impact of that acquisition. However, if that social impact investigation carries on forever, the land will never be acquired. That's why many people say put a legally defined time frame.
So,
and 6 months is not a bad one.
This will be a binding on the government. They will have to finish the things within that time frame. We don't have any problem by making it binding on the government.
So if the government were to introduce into the amendments that the social impact investigation has to be completed within 6 months, and if it hasn't been completed, then by default the acquisition goes through, would that be acceptable to you?
How can you do that? How can you do that? That means the government is at fault then.
So then you're not accepting any legal time bound.
The legal time, it's up to it's on the government. How the government can take away the land of the people,
The government
and
can say,
because of its own efficiencies.
Mr. Mahajan,
yeah.
forgive me, Dr. Mahajan, the government can easily say a social impact assessment is necessary. However, it has to be completed in 6 months.
Yeah.
And if it is not completed in 6 months, then by default, the acquisition will go through. That sort of default clause alongside a legal time frame exists in many other areas. Why is it not acceptable here, or is it acceptable here? That's my question. Is it unacceptable or is it acceptable?
What I'm saying is, for the inefficiency of the government, how can the government make the society victim of the same?
So then what you're saying to me, without actually saying it explicitly, is that a legally bound time frame is not acceptable to you.
No, legally bound time frame is for the government.
Yes, but the corollary is that if you haven't done it within the legally bound time frame, then by default the acquisition goes through. Will you accept that corollary?
See, if it is so, no. It has to, the penalty will go on, should be on the government, not on the people at large.
So then you're perfectly clear now. You're not going to accept a legally bound time frame, because any legally bound time frame would put the penalty on the government in the sense that it would mean the acquisition will go through by default. That you're not prepared to accept.
It's not on the government, it's on the society.
All right.
Yeah.
It's a quibble over who the penalty is on, but the impact of your answer is crystal clear. You will not accept a legally bound time frame. Let's come to something else. Many people say that the acquisition in industrial corridors and the acquisition for PPP projects is critical because it creates jobs, it creates industry, it creates manufacturing. That in a sense boosts the economy. Would you accept leniency for land acquired for PPP projects and for industrial corridors?
What I'm saying is, we have been saying time and again, Swadeshi Jagan Manch is not against industrialization. Swadeshi Jagan Manch is not against the building of infrastructure.
Hence my question, will you accept leniency in these two areas?
What I'm saying is, even then, the social impact assessment, the consent clause and the food security, these are the key issues. Yes, like you see, if you have a food security clause, you say that because you have to build infrastructure you can do away with the food security clause. But I am saying that we have a very limited cultivable area, and if that limited cultivable area is made even more limited, now
So I'm interrupting you because I don't want to get lost in detail. I want the audience to follow you clearly. You're saying to me clearly that there is no leniency for either the industrial corridors or for PPP projects. Whatever applies for other acquisitions will apply for acquisitions here. No leniency in these two areas.
So what I am saying is, Swadeshi Jaga Manch has very clearly stated that when it comes to defense, yes.
No, I'm not. I'll come to defense later.
Yeah.
I'll come to defense later. Please stick to this.
Yeah.
I'm asking you a specific question. The audience wants a specific answer. I'm saying when we're talking about acquisition for land corridors, what are called industrial corridors, and when we're talking about acquisition for PPP projects, are you prepared for any special leniency in these two areas? And you're saying no.
Let me tell you.
Okay, give me a clear answer.
No.
Let's not go around in circles.
No. I will have to give you the answer. No? As far as the industrial corridors are concerned, roads and the railways, in principle, as a rule, no multi-crop land, no irrigated land should be acquired. However, if as an exception you have a stretch of 1, 2, 3 kilometers where you have to take the land which is irrigated, as an exception you can, but as a rule you cannot.
Okay, that's clear. What about a second form of leniency for industrial corridors and for PPP projects? Would you be prepared just in these two areas to further dilute the consent clause, to further dilute the social impact clause?
You see,
give me a clear answer, yes or no.
No, definitely not. Only exception is defense.
That's it. Let's come then to the 5-year clause. In the original 2013 bill, the 5-year clause stipulated that if land was acquired for a particular project and that project hadn't been completed in 5 years, the land would revert to the original owners.
Yeah.
Mr. Jaitley very cogently has said that this would make a mockery of long gestation projects like atomic power plants, like infrastructure in the sense of dams, like military installations, etc. Therefore, he wants the 5-year clause to be changed. He would like each project to stipulate what its period is and then determine the lapse in terms of the project requirement. Are you prepared to accept that change?
You see, what the government is suggesting and what Swadeshi Jaga Manch thinks, there is a gap. The gap is with regard to the project period which they have stipulated. This is a very vague stipulation. Therefore, what we want, that if due to some reasons projects are delayed, then that has to be clearly specified. It should be in black and white in the law, that if due to these reasons the projects are delayed, then yes, we can relax, but it can't go.
So in other words,
go on.
You're talking about in the first instance, in cases where projects are delayed, those projects have to be delayed for certain specified reasons. If the project is delayed for one of those specified reasons, then you are prepared to accept a waiver of the 5-year clause, but not for unspecified reasons.
So why we are saying so? Because generally this is the practice, that you acquire land, you take land, you don't work on the land use is changed, and then it is used for luxury purposes. This we cannot allow.
That I understand, but we're talking about something slightly different as well. I'm not just talking about waiving the 5-year or the 6-year or the 10-year time clause where projects are delayed for acceptable specified reasons. I'm also talking about amending the 5-year clause altogether, because that's what Mr. Jaitley has actually suggested, and instead of the 5-year clause you have a project identified time frame, which is probably different in each case. And therefore, if up till that time frame is exhausted, right, the land will remain with the person who's acquired it. Are you prepared to accept that?
What I'm saying is that you don't change the land use then. You don't change the land use, let the project period be over, then in that case there will not be any incentive for the people, the developers, to retain that land and use it for some other alternative purposes.
That's
This
very
has
clever.
been the practice.
This is very clever. What you're saying is if we, the Jagran Manch, agree to changing the 5-year clause to a 10, 15, 20-year clause depending upon the requirement of each project, during that period, you can't change the land use. The land use can only be changed when the project is complete, to avoid the possibility, no matter how remote, that in fact the person acquiring the land may actually then use it for luxury purposes or other purposes instead.
See what is happening. This is an experience in the country. For so much of land was acquired for SEZs. Now more than 50% of the land is is unused.
Quite right. And you want to ensure that doesn't become regular practice.
Yes.
You have recently met the parliamentary committee. You've deposed in front of them. How did they receive your suggestions?
There are parliamentary morals which they had said that we should not reveal what transpired between.
Well, it's in the papers already.
It's about what our stand is. I have already told you my stand.
Tell me this. Do you think the government is receptive to your thinking?
Yes. I think right from the very beginning, government has shown flexibilities. First flexibility was shown when the bill was brought in the parliament.
I'm going to have to interrupt you because we're running out of time. You're absolutely serious when you say Arun Jaitley is prepared to be flexible and to accommodate your thinking?
You see, at first instance, they made 9
running
amendments.
Out of time. You have to give me a yes or no because we've only got 10 seconds left. That's why I'm pushing you. Are you confident Arun Jaitley will accept your thinking?
You see, I'm not talking about one person or the other. I'm talking about the government.
The government is acceptable.
Today only the Birendra Singh, I have read the statement of the Birendra Singh. He says that the concerns of SJM, concerns of Bharatiya Kisan Sangh, we are going to accommodate them if it is in the interest of the farmers.
All right, Dr. Mahajan, we're going to have to leave it there. A pleasure talking to you.
Thank you.